Yeah, thank you very much. Welcome. Thank you very much for coming. We're very, very excited to have you all. We're very excited also to have Torkel Udgard here from Sweden to talk about Grafana in a little bit. What I'm going to talk about is what we've been doing in cloud metrics for past couple of years. One of my compatriots, somebody who used to work at Rackspace, gave a talk at this very same meetup a year ago and described what it was that we were doing. We're doing this thing called Blueflood. And what I'm going to do today is talk about the things that we've done in the last year to make it much better, what we've been doing as a team, running this in production. And I'll talk a little bit about what Blueflood is, but in general I'm going to just focus on the changes. I'm also going to focus on what we've done to integrate Grafana, cloud metrics with Grafana. So first of all, who we are. There's a number of us in the audience tonight who are actually part of this team. Shane, Thilo, Chinmay, George, and Dominic. If you're there, you can wave hands or whatever. We are also an open source project, so there are others out there. Some of you are here tonight, Ji-Young, James, an alumni. I don't see Lakshmi, but there are others out there. So thank you to the community. So now Blueflood, I'll talk a little bit about what this is. Lakshmi, a year ago, in this very same room, at this same meetup, said, this is a giant distributed calculator that loves numbers. There's another guy who used to be on our team who says a distributed system to manage time series data. We say multi-tenanted distributed metrics processing system, which is just to say that it's a big data store. It runs on Cassandra. We chuck millions of metrics at it per minute. It's multi-tenanted, and we love it. We think it's great. So what does it do, or sort of more, how does it do it? The basic setup is that there's an ingest module that takes in millions of metrics as fast as it possibly can. There's an indexing module that will be indexing those metrics as they're coming in, allowing you to search over them, query for them. There's a roll-up module, which is rolling these things up, sort of a pre-optimization that we do so that we can return large time periods faster. And there's a query module so that people can ask the database questions, get results back. At a very, very basic level, that's what we're doing. Why should you care about it? So the main reason that we care about it and that you might care about it is the scale at which we run. So I'll talk about this a little bit later, but you know, we're taking in millions of metrics a minute, something around 70,000 metrics a second. If you're running anywhere near this amount of scale, there aren't too many options out there for you yet. The more are coming on the scene, but certainly when we started this project, there really wasn't anything out there. There also wasn't anything that was really multi-tenanted in the way that we needed at the time, which is a very important point for us at Rackspace, because we got millions of tenants and we wanted to put all of their data in a central place as opposed to having little tiny metrics databases dotted around. I mean, could you imagine us setting up an individual Graphite instance for every single one of our tenants? It would be madness. So no, we had to build this because we needed these two things. If you have these same sort of constraints, you might care about this. So there are some others out there, as I mentioned, and it's worth touching on why we didn't go with some of the others. You might ask us why we didn't go with KairosDB. One main reason there is that they put everything into one big column family. It doesn't work with our current setup, where we have different column families on different data nodes. I'll talk more about that a little bit. I'll touch on that a little bit later. InfluxDB is another one that is very popular now, particularly with Grafana being able to integrate those two. For us, it didn't seem to scale to the levels that we needed. And it's not just us who have felt this way. I've been talking to a team working on Minaska. They feel the same, that it's not quite meeting the scale that they need. They run Vertica when they really want to scale things, but that's a paid solution, so we're sort of stuck. OpenTSDB, again, there were some concerns about that. We like the metric tagging system that they have. We're not crazy about the downsampling because they don't pre-calculate the roll-ups. Also, because they use HBase, there's a single point of failure with their name nodes, things like this. We have little critiques about all of these systems that are out there. So we have Blueflood, which we think is much better. I'm sort of rushing through this because I've got lots to say. You can ask questions later. What I really want to get to is what we've done since Lakshmi's talk last year. So, what's new? In this last year, one of the big things was that we put a REST API in front of Blueflood. This was when Lakshmi was talking. It was experimental. We were moving towards it. It's now what we use. It's in production. You can use it too. Elasticsearch indexer. So when metrics come in, we now index them. You can query metrics. You can before, when Lakshmi was talking, there was no real way to query for your metrics. You just had to know what your metric name was, and then ask very specifically for that metric. Now you can actually do an Elasticsearch query and get whatever your metrics are in any sort of way, shape, and form, and get information about them. We added exporters, so you can export to things like Kafka or Rackspace cloud files. Specifically, the roll-ups that we perform will ship them off to these other places. And when they're in those other places, various other teams can do analysis on them. We've also added batch operations, which hugely improved our performance for both roll-up and ingestion. When we were talking about this last time, we were saying experimentally we were adding new data types more than just gauges, and so now we've added for statsd support timers, gauges, and sets, and those are actually now in production and working. I'll show you a bit later statsd working in Grafana. And then another big thing that we've done is made it much, much easier to get metrics to us. So one aspect of that was adding the REST API. You can now send us metrics via REST API. That's much easier. But that wasn't quite enough to get people really shipping data to us. We started to integrate with all sorts of other tools that were out there that are generating metrics already. Things like statsd, things like Logstash, Riemann, CollectD plugin is the latest one that we're working on. So trying to just integrate with ecosystems that are out there already, in particular the ones that we know teams at Rackspace are using, because we know we have willing audiences there, and going around to everyone that we know and getting them to just start shipping data to us. Oh, I could have just pressed the button and that would have told me. I didn't have to remember what I was talking about. So yeah, CollectD in progress, great. That was useful. There are more on the way. The visual integrations that we have connected cloud metrics at Blueflood with graphite-web, although we don't think that's very pretty. So the one that we mostly focus on is Grafana. And essentially, we built this database, but we needed to put a pretty face on it. We needed to show people that it was possible to actually see the metrics that are in this database. So this is what we've done. And I will show you this in a little bit. So we'll come back to the visual integration stuff. There are tons of things that we have done. I've been speaking very, very quickly, but as fast as I could have spoken over the last 5 minutes, it would not be fast enough to actually speak about all the things that we have done in a year's time span. So if you really want to go, you can go to the GitHub Blueflood repo and go through every single commit and, you know, just be amazed at our prolificness. So, cloud metrics. I've been sort of using Blueflood and cloud metrics interchangeably. Blueflood is this open source project. Cloud metrics is the team that runs Blueflood in production for Rackspace. So that's the team, and I'll talk a little bit about what our production cluster looks like so you can get an idea of the scale that we run at. The cluster that we run has a 32-node Cassandra cluster. We have just 2 ingestion nodes, 2 roll-up nodes, 3 Elasticsearch nodes for the indexing part of things. We also augment the space on our 32 Cassandra nodes with cloud block storage space. So we just needed more space for all our metrics. And we have a product here, cloud block storage, that we shove more data space onto each one of those 32 nodes so that each node has enough space for all our metrics. So if that gives you a sense of the scale that we run at, you know, it's not huge, it's not vast, but it is certainly significant, 32 nodes in a Cassandra ring. For those of you who care about such things, our replication factor is 3, our consistency level is 1. Any questions?
What
Good.
version of Cassandra?
2.0, and I will get to that as well, because that was a huge bonus when we moved to 2.0. Just to give you a pretty picture of how things work, people can send us metrics, either MAS, which is our monitoring product, or the internet's. They'll go through load balancers in front. Repose is just our method of authentication, authorization. And it reaches our API node. It'll push to 2 different places. One is Elasticsearch for indexing. The other is Cassandra for storing the actual metrics. Then there is this process that I've mentioned a couple times of roll-ups, which every 5 minutes, every 20 minutes, every hour, 4 hours daily is reaching into Cassandra, grabbing the metrics for the last 5 minutes, for the last 20 minutes, so on, and rolling them up, doing an aggregation to, and then storing those metrics back into Cassandra. As I said, there's some cloud block storage that gets added on, and we're also pushing those roll-ups to cloud files. Is that pretty picture? Looks good? All right. And then in terms of scale, this is what our growth has been over the past year. So in fact, we were sort of closer to maybe 1 million in September last year. And just at this last couple of months, we've been accelerating the growth for a number of reasons. One, there's been a movement within Rackspace to get a whole lot more metrics to us. The other is that we've opened the doors to be able to get metrics to us. The REST API, the various ingestion integrations that we have made possible is the reason why this slope is trending like this. And this will largely continue unabated until about 40 million metrics or so. And that's what we're planning to hit in another 6 months, something like that.
Good question.
Yeah.
That number is the number of individual data points?
Number of individual data points per minute.
Okay.
And per minute's sort of an odd time, but it's because a lot of the defaults in a lot of the metrics systems that we're dealing with are roughly a minute. Well, they're set to a minute, the defaults. So this turns into something like 70,000 metrics per second, something like that if you want to think about that, or about 6 billion data points a day. So to give you a sense of scale. You mentioned, which Cassandra, one of the things that allowed us to get to these heights is moving to Cassandra 2.0. If you're not there yet, you really should be. It got rid of a lot of the sort of gremlins that were in the system when we were at 1.0. Lots of things just sort of magically started working better when we went to 2.0. So it was right when Lakshmi gave this talk last year, we were in the middle of trying to move there. And there was a bit of agony about moving. But having done so, it was certainly worth it. The other thing that it allowed us to do was put different column families on different volumes. So what we will do with the full resolution metrics is put them on the SSD of the 32 nodes, the actual machines that are running, and then the roll-ups get put on the CBS, the Cloud Block Storage volumes, which aren't SSD, they're just regular SATA drives. So, and that's only possible in Cassandra 2. So a few anecdotes about that. The other thing operationally was that we moved to virtual hardware, which gave us elasticity, as the cloud does. So that's one of the other reasons why we've been able to succeed over the past year. For the future, we're going to make another move. Now that we've just moved on to virtual machines, we're going to move back off virtual machines onto this thing that we have at Rackspace called On Metal. And I suppose this is sort of a plug for them, but they're great. It's great. It's metal machines, but with the elasticity of the cloud. So they use OpenStack to provision bare metal servers. For us, it makes a ton of sense. We don't have to use Cloud Block Storage anymore. We can have everything on SSD. They're super fast. We'd love to be on them. So it's another thing that's going to get us to that 40 million plus mark that we have over the next 6 months. Architectural changes that we have coming up. There's a whole bunch of things on the roadmap. We have yet to move away from this library that we're using currently, AstianAX, and move to the native DataStax driver. We believe that that's going to give us a huge performance boost. I'm almost flummoxed about this part of it because we've just been talking day in and day out about all the changes that we want to make. There's changes to string metrics that we need to make, improvements on like Boolean metrics that we want to make, a whole bunch of architectural changes like that. Things that you can learn about if you join us in the Blueflood IRC channel and ask us lots of questions. Please do so. So, how does this relate to you? One, if you're planning on doing anything at scale with metrics and want to run your own system, this could very well apply to you. One of the things that's going to tie all this together today is Grafana, and the fact that we now integrate with this might appeal to you. So I'm going to switch to demos. And here, oh, that's annoying. There we go. And I think Torkel will demand that I put it into full screen mode so that it looks as pretty as possible. But this is a dashboard that we set up just today in a couple of minutes, which is for the data platform team that we have here. And what's happening here, I have to describe it because you can't see it. The metrics that are powering this dashboard here are all coming from cloud metrics. They're not coming from Graphite, they're not coming from InfluxDB or any of the other sources. They're coming from our database, Blueflood. The other things that I would like to point out here, if we go into something like this, can you actually see these? Is it big enough? So these are stats-D metrics that are coming in. And so just to remind you that we have these various ingestion integrations. It's better. Stats-D is one of them. You can now, with a little piece of configuration, start sending stats-D metrics to Cloud Metrics or Blueflood. And then you can come to Grafana and pull up your stats-D metrics in Grafana. All very, very simple. And Torkel is going to show you amazingly, amazingly pretty graphs in a little second.
Just one point that you can clarify is that you're actually going through graphite-web.
Yeah, that's important.
So all graphite sort of query features are available.
Thank you for pointing that out. That was the one thing that I really meant to mention, so I will re-mention it. Yes, we go through Graphite API, so all of those functions that you know and love from Graphite are still available to you. Like, we did not try and re-implement all of those functions. We're just merely stealing them, essentially. So make that absolutely clear. Thank you very much. The other piece to this demo, so this is the dashboard. The other piece, if you are a Rackspace customer, we have a heat deployment. It's what's called orchestrations in our world. And it's not yet in this create stack list, but if we just grab the link, so there's a heat template here that you can use to spin up a new Grafana instance on Rackspace hardware. And you can come down here, customize template, link to template, drop a link in, go through, hit an API key, put in your API key, put in your username, your tenant ID, whatever mine is, hit create stack, and that's exactly what we did to create the dashboard that I was just showing you. And then you wait for a couple minutes, it installs all the things, installs Graphite API, sets up Nginx and everything else that needs to happen, and then, or is it Apache? We're doing Apache, aren't we? And then you get this. So it takes about 5 minutes to set this part up, and then it's done. So that's the quick little demo of stuff. As I said, Torkel will show you more pretty pictures, way, way more pretty pictures. I'm just going to go back to this for a second to talk about a larger sort of issue with the whole metrics community. It's really actually exciting to have an entire room full of people interested in metrics, because we've been dealing with metrics for a while now, and I have to say it's a very, very fractured community. There are a bunch of different back-end systems. I know we're not helping that any by creating another one, but then there are a bazillion different dashboards that do various things. But even worse than that, though, is that there's really no unified language for talking about metrics, and everybody has a different opinion of exactly how to deal with these things and what to call certain things. And it's really a mess, and it really shouldn't be. It shouldn't be this hard. We should be able to come together, figure out a common language for talking about these things. And then the tools that we're creating will become much better. If people like Torkel didn't have to fight through this muck and mire just to be able to make a pretty graph, intelligently, it would be much, much better. So the larger message here is that we need to come together as one, as a unified metrics world. So it's really lovely to see you all here. Let's keep on coming to these things and join us in our various IRC channels, mailing lists. We'd love to see you. To that end, I want to say thank you again to those of you who aren't a part of Rackspace. I thank them every day. But G. Young, James, everyone who participates in our community specifically, thank you very, very much. And to everyone else, you're very welcome to come join us wherever we are. So thank you very much. That's it from me. And do you have questions? Question.
So you mentioned multi-tenancy support. How do you handle one customer starving another one as far as ingestion capacity, something like that?
Well, currently in our production cluster, we only open up ingestion to specific tenants. We haven't sort of opened the doors to everybody being able to ingest for free. So it was sort of in, we're trying to figure out exactly how to do that peacefully or manageably, or how we're going to do that essentially. So that hasn't been our main issue to worry about specific tenants totally bombarding us. The other thing is that we do we have rate limits on people ingesting, so the people who can ingest have a certain rate limit, and so that's how we protect against that currently. Yeah. What are the questions?
Strictly numeric data, how about non-numeric?
So we do string metrics sort of right now still. The reason why I laugh is that we just spent 2 hours as a team fighting about whether we should or should not have string metrics forever in there. So you've struck a nerve. But right now, support is still there. And yeah, so it is there.
So it's not like MongoDB where you can just throw arbitrary freeform data stuff into it?
No, and we want to encourage people to not think of it like that at all. It's time series data, it's not event data. People often tend to try and think of it like event data, and we have to go, no, 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 no. This is, you've got to think of it differently. And, you know, as I said, some of us really firmly believe that it should just be numeric data and nothing else. So, but yes, that's what we're doing.
Why shouldn't you think about string data as being time series?
I do. We could have a 3-hour conversation about that, as I said. Well, one is that how do you graph that?
And how do you roll ups?
Yeah, like it's a very different type of data. And whether Blueflood should handle that is another question. Like maybe the service that we provide, Cloud Metrics, does encompass both, but Blueflood should focus on one, and then we should have Elasticsearch contain string metrics, because most of the time what people want to do with string metrics is exactly what Elasticsearch allows you to do. So yeah, and go and search on things, and so you know, there's a question as to what Blueflood should do versus like what customers expect out of a metrics service, and that's sort of what we're trying to get at, what we were discussing all afternoon.
Good question. So on large scale, the question is why do this, right? In terms of time series are nice, the dashboards representing them are nice, but why do we do that? As far as if this is part of the monitoring and alerting infrastructure that we want to have in order to prevent outages or explore outages after they have happened, how is that? How does Blueflood fit into that larger scheme of things in your organization? And what are the general ideas that you have about that?
I mean, do you mean simply like how do you use dashboards like this to analyze a situation that you're having, or?
Right.
I mean, you can come in here and look at spikes and.
No, that's the thing.
Sorry.
Oh. That's the thing. There are, like you said, there are millions of metrics per minute.
Yeah.
Right. It is not possible physically to watch them all, or even watch a very small portion of them. Even if you plaster all your walls with dashboards, and God knows many of us do, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It doesn't get you far. And when we think about alerting, for instance, right? We are in such a rudimentary state of the world there with our fixed threshold alerts that we manually plug in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where do we go from there as an industry and as a field?
You should talk.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. There are lots of ways of thinking about the next sort of generation of alerting tools. Where does this fit in that ecosystem, I think, is what you're wanting to know. Right. So one of the ways that this might fit in, beyond just the manual looking at graphs that you can do, Blueflood, the way that it rolls up, if you remember, we have an exporter back to Kafka, and one of the ways that we're planning on re-architecting our whole monitoring platform is by having things just pull off a Kafka queue, and the things that can be analyzed as part of that could be our roll-ups that we're pushing back onto that queue. So Blueflood is accepting a whole bunch of data, it's creating roll-ups, but then it's also feeding other people's analysis of what's going on, maybe doing I'm losing my words, but doing various MapReduce things, or anomaly detection on the roll-up data that's coming in, as well as just the raw data that they can get off the same Kafka queue. So that's one way that we can feed that next generation too. Yeah.
That'd be interesting to see in detail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just one last maybe?
Last one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if I have this right, so Blueflood is the implementation, and then Cloudmetrics is offering Blueflood as a service.
Yeah.
And is Cloudmetrics, is that available, and is that something you can just go get and pay for?
Yeah, so right now, the query part of it is free. So if you're a Rackspace customer, you already have access to the query endpoint. The ingestion endpoint, if you just want to ask me, I will turn it on for you. But as I said to the first gentleman, we haven't opened it up to every single person. Just there's some questions that we have to sort out about whether we want to, how do we do it exactly. But we're certainly looking for beta customers of that. So please, yes, come speak. Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.